Happy Saturday morning, Restore. Glad to be with you again. I know some of you are watching in churches or in other gathering places. Some of you may be watching alone. I'm just glad that we can be together, and I hope that next year we're able to all be in the same room. I know it's not enjoyable watching on a screen, but I do want us to think about this book of Habakkuk as we consider this theme, re, the prefix that means back or again. Let me just start with this. How many of you have ever kind of played around on Google Earth? You've found your house, or you found looked up some place that's special from your childhood. Let me just try. I think we can kind of play this, even though this is recorded. Some of you may still be able to guess. Here is a picture. It may be difficult for you to see, and that's okay. But just see if somebody can raise your hand and shout out where you are and guess what this is on Google Earth. It's an image that a screenshot I actually took from Google Earth. Take just a couple of seconds and see if anybody gets close. Somebody's probably already gotten it watching out there. Maybe you guessed that this was the castle at the Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. You may also know about the hidden Mickeys all around Disney World. Fun fact, at Hollywood Studios, the entire park is one giant hidden Mickey. You'll see Mickey's face there. You'll see his ears, and then you'll see his face there. That's just something that a lot of people don't know. It's kind of cool. All right, here's another one. This one's a little easier. This is a Google Earth image. See if you can raise your hand and just shout out what this is. Somebody probably got it right. This is the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. Okay, here's one that's a little more challenging. Maybe tougher for those of you where you are, because this is a little closer to home for us here, but this one's really challenging. I wouldn't expect anybody there to get that one, but there might be somebody that did. You probably can't see this where you are over here watching on the screen. But this right here is Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee, home of the Volunteers. I'm not a big Tennessee Vol fan, but this is a pretty well-known landmark to a lot of our folks here. Okay, here's one that more of you will probably know. Some of you actually probably been here, is my guess, from Google Earth. See if you can look at this image and just shout it out in your viewing party if you know what it is. Maybe somebody got it. This is the fountain at Lipscomb University. Many of us have been there at Impact. Some of you probably were baptized in this very fountain. Here's one that is from our town, but you would probably recognize it because it would look the same in your town. Again, it's a tough image to see. It's blurry. It's on Google Earth. Did anybody get it right? It is a Sonic drive-in restaurant. Maybe you've got those where you are. This one here is also very challenging, but my guess is there's somebody watching that even if you don't recognize it, you know exactly where this is. Okay? It was probably a girl that got it, if they got it at all. This is it. It's the Warner Brothers studio lot, but this is actually the set of Stars Hollow from the Gilmore Girls, which is on at our house every single night of the week. Every day of the month. Every month of the year. This is Stars Hollow. It's also, guys, it's also the set of Hazard County from the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard. So if you're a big Gilmore Girls fan, or somebody in your house is, you'll notice that they drive by the Hazard County Courthouse. Anyway, I digress. Some other fun things that you find on Google Earth. These are just things that people have randomly found while searching. Here's a huge lion. This is Mattel headquarters. They make themselves easy to find. I like this one. This is real, out in the middle of the desert. Or maybe you've seen the one that's made out of old Coke bottles, and this is actually the Coca-Cola logo. Here's the bat signal. I'm not sure where that is, but I like this one. Again, somebody stumbling across this on Google Earth. This is awesome. This is a whole group of hippos. I'm not even sure what you call a herd. I don't know what you call a group of hippos, but here they are. Here's a corn maze that looks like Oprah Winfrey. This is the world's largest swimming pool from Google Earth and the world's least well-designed basketball court from Google Earth. And then you've got this one, images. This one says Jesus loves you, but one that is kind of cool that maybe you've seen before. Somebody sends somebody to an address on Google Earth, and here's the "Will you marry me" proposal. The reason I show you these images are because you didn't quite recognize some of those landmarks, and yet you've been there. Many of you have been to Disney World. Some of you have been to Neyland Stadium or Lipscomb University or a Sonic Drive-In. Maybe not Stars Hollow, but you've been to these places. You just didn't recognize them from that perspective. But when you begin to see things from God's perspective, they take on a completely different image or meaning. See, Habakkuk finds himself in the middle of a mess that he does not understand. You remember the questions from chapter 1? Chamberlain acted them out for us last night. We don't know exactly whether he was complaining, whether he was angry and betrayed, whether he was frustrated or just confused and bewildered or maybe sarcastic. But whatever, we know that Habakkuk said, God, I don't get this. I do not understand what is going on in my life. And my guess is there's somebody watching this who's asked that very same question. I don't get it. I don't understand, God, what you're up to. I don't know what you're doing. Because see, we all want resolution. There's an R-E word, even though it's not a prefix. Well, in a sense it is. We want a solution again. We want a resolution to our problem, and God's more interested in a relationship. So Habakkuk finds himself in the middle of this mess, and he says, God, I don't get it. You're sending the Babylonians to attack us? Don't you realize they are the worst people? Those are the bad guys. God, if you do that, nobody's going to believe in you. They're going to think you've completely abandoned us. God, this makes no sense. Now forget about Habakkuk, forget about Babylon, and forget about the nation of Israel and Bible history. I just want you to put yourself in your school, sitting at your cafeteria table, where you're thinking, God, I don't know what you're up to. And I don't know what is going on in the world. It may be something happening in your own home or something that you see on the news or in your school. I want to go to another book of the Bible that many of us are familiar with, this chapter, Matthew 28. You know the Great Commission. Jesus goes, they're all there, they're gathered there on the mountain. And it says that when they saw Him, they worshiped Him, but some doubted. Then Jesus comes and He gives the Great Commission. We're all familiar with that. We should spend a whole another theme just looking at this. But I just want us to look at these words for just a moment. Because I've often thought about this. They worshiped, but some doubted. It makes you feel like the worshipers are over here, and if you're not really sure and you doubt, come stand over here. It sounds like there's two groups of people. But the way the language is structured, it implies that the same people worshiped that were doubting. Not all of them that worshiped doubted, and likely not all of them that doubted worship. But at least here, the way it's written, it leads us to believe that it is possible to worship and doubt at the same time. Now, it's really important that you understand this idea of doubt. You see, we get our word double, or it means, two minds. So 70% of graduating seniors say that they have significant doubts. Now, some of you are about to graduate. Some of you are in other grades. And my guess is you've asked some of the very same questions about God. You've been afraid to say them maybe because you don't want to disappoint somebody in your home or at your church, but you've had some doubts. Less than 35% talked with mentors or peers about their doubts. That's probably true of those of you watching this. Some of you have doubts, but you don't exactly know how to go about talking about those doubts. You have questions like, does God exist, or does God love me? Am I living the life that God wants me to live? Is Jesus Christ the only way to God? Or God, what are you doing in the world? So, there's three main sources of doubts. I don't know which one probably is the biggest for you, but there's intellectual questions. Some of you just have scientific minds and you're like, I just can't get everything to reconcile. I'm not exactly sure how this happens, or creation and evolution. And there's intellectual questions, philosophical. Then there's life experiences. Some of you have been through things that make you say, like we looked at yesterday, if God were good, He wouldn't want this to happen. If God were powerful, He could have stopped this. Why did He allow this? God, are you there? And then we have what are called behavioral pre-commitments. It's a fancy way of saying my behavior is such that it makes me not want to believe in a God because I don't want to be accountable to Him. So John Ortberg wrote a book called Faith and Doubt. And he says the most important word in the title is this word, is this ampersand that you see right there in the middle. Because those two things can live together. Habakkuk shows us that. Again, it's important that we study this together this particular time in this year because of what we're all living through, to know that many of us have said, God, You've made it harder for me to follow You than easier during this time of quarantine. Those that live with faith maturity as an adult, if you're going to have a mature faith as an adult, there's two things that have to happen. One, it deals with your view of God and the safety that you felt as a teen to express doubts. I worded that in a very confusing way. What I meant is that when we find those who have a mature faith as an adult, we find that there are two things that are true of them. One, they have a healthy view of God. They've thought about God, they think about God, but this one is crucial. They had safety as a teenager to express those doubts. Now, church leaders, my prayer is, and my hope, and if you're a parent watching this, my hope is that you are creating environments in your youth groups where it's safe for a student to come and ask those questions that they don't understand. Habakkuk is a book that says you can go and ask all of these questions. And Habakkuk says, God, I don't know where You are. I'm looking for You, but I don't see You. God, how long am I going to have to cry out and You not listen? Again, was he angry? Was he brokenhearted? Was he sarcastic, or was he just confused? Well, I want to give you another metaphor. A Chinese artist, Lu Bolin. I may have shared these pictures years ago. He's still doing things, I believe. This is a picture of Lu, and he was a pretty popular artist in China, but a lot of his art was censored because he spoke out against the government. And so they began to silence him. So then he started doing pictures like this, where he would paint himself into the background of popular places in his country. Lou said, I couldn't find suitable work, and I felt that there was no place for me in society. I experienced the dark side of society without social relations, and I had a feeling that no one cared about me. I felt myself unnecessary in this world. We could apply this in a lot of ways. It kind of sounds like the way a lot of us have felt during quarantine, or those of us that when we were in the middle of a shutdown, and some of you are in places that still are. So Lou just goes and does these pictures where he sits down and he paints himself into the background of places like the Great Wall of China. If you're watching, it may be very difficult to see that he's right there. These pictures that kind of illustrate some of the oppression that he faced at the hands of his government. Other people began to join him for art exhibitions. These are pretty fascinating pictures as he just blends right in. Here he is on the stairwell, and here he is in the middle of a forest. Or I love this one in the middle of a store. There he is right in the middle. Or in a movie theater where art was often silenced and censored. It's just fascinating how he does this. Perhaps my favorite one is this one right here, because people are like, wait a minute, where is he? I don't know that I can find him. And if you look very carefully, you'll see him standing. He's right there. So maybe you've seen this bumper sticker before. Now you're probably ahead of me. You know there's two ways to see this. There's either the atheist who says, God is nowhere. Habakkuk even says, God, I think You're gone. But then a simple refocusing allows you to see that without changing any letters, you don't have to rearrange any letters, but it also says God is now here. It really depends upon your perspective. Here's another optical illusion that maybe some of you may have a more difficult time than others seeing, but can you see it? If you just kind of refocus your eyes, it says open your eyes. See, students, as I think about Restore, the reason that this event is so great for us every September when we normally are able to have it is because it allows us to just get together and to refocus and to remember, to reimagine, to re-engage, to find new relationships. Because a lot of us are asking these questions. How long am I going to have to deal with the pain of this situation? How long am I going to struggle with this addiction? How long, God, are You going to allow racial tension to go on in our country? How long are we going to have children that are going to starve? God, how long and why? So I want us to go back to Habakkuk. I don't have all these words on a slide, but God says, hey Habakkuk, I heard your complaint, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to be utterly amazed, and you're not even going to understand it if I told you. But the Babylonians are coming. Habakkuk doesn't like this. And so now I want us to finish Habakkuk 1. I'm in verse 12. If you've got a Bible or you're scrolling on your phone, would you follow along? Because it's important that I think you see these words. Habakkuk comes to God a second time. I can't believe it. This guy's got guts. He says, God, your answer is not good enough. I'm going to need a little bit more. And so he says, Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. Lord, you've appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. Now again, if we had Chamberlain back, he's not here today, but if we had Chamberlain, how would Habakkuk read this? This almost sounds like sarcasm. He could be saying, God, aren't you from everlasting? Oh, I thought you were the powerful God. God, I thought you were completely in charge. This is a terrible plan. Or maybe he's just so confused. God, verse 13, your eyes are too pure to look on evil. Like, I thought you couldn't tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent? Maybe he said this through tears or a clenched fist. I don't know how he said it. But I know these are his words. Verse 14, you've made people like the fish in the sea, like the sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks, and he catches them in his net. He gathers them up in his dragnet, and he rejoices and is glad. Therefore, he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations? Again, all he's saying is, God, why is this your plan? This is a terrible plan. Those guys are bad guys. So look what he says at the beginning of chapter 2. I will stand my watch and I will station myself on the ramparts. Think of that as a watchtower. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I'm to give to his complaint. Some translations even say I'm going to stand on my tower. It's like he says, God, I'm camping out right here. I've got a good view. If you're showing up, I'll be the first to see you and I'll let everybody know you're there. But right now, you seem to be nowhere. God is nowhere. And he says, God, I'm going to stand here until I get an answer to this complaint. And then look in verse 2. Then the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end, and it will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come, and it will not delay. Well, what's he going to say? If you're confused, just hold on for just a second. Let me give you a little story before we get to probably the most well-known, maybe the second most well-known verse in all of Habakkuk. So years ago, if we were there at Restore Live, I would have acted this out. And it would have made some people a little uncomfortable. Years ago, I had our group and I had a cup of water sitting on the edge of a table. I was doing my lesson and I tipped over the water and I spilled the water on the floor. And I asked Ryan, that was actually his name. I said, hey Ryan, would you clean up this water? I'm sorry, I spilled the water. And so Ryan stands up. And Ryan, we'd not rehearsed this. I had not told him. He stands up and he starts to walk to the kitchen. Well, why is he going to the kitchen? What do you think he was going to go get? Get a paper towel. He starts to, and I said, Ryan, I said I need you to come and clean up this water. And he said, yes, sir. And he starts to walk back to the kitchen. And then I said, Ryan, I have asked you to come clean up this water. Now, I was getting uncomfortable because I knew people were getting tense. Ryan was a little angry and everybody was feeling really weird in the room. I said, Ryan, I have asked you now 3 times to clean up this water. And he said, I'm going to. And I said, Ryan, the spill is right here. And the water is right here. Where are you going? He says, I'm going to the kitchen to get a paper towel. And I said, oh, so you are trying to say that though it looks like you're walking in the opposite direction, you are actually in the process of taking care of the mess. And what looks to me like you are ignoring my message is actually obedience on your part to solve the problem. And everybody in the room then slowly started to realize, even Ryan. And he said, yeah. He went and got a paper towel and he came back. And I said, to all of our students, and I'm going to say to some of you, you're in the middle of a mess and you're wondering where God is and you think He's walking in the other direction. He might be going to the kitchen to get a paper towel to come back and clean up the mess. Just because God hasn't taken care of a problem doesn't mean He's not going to. You say, well, Skid, why do you say that? Because look in Habakkuk. Look in verse 3. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. Well, what is he saying is not going to delay? Like, what's he saying wait on? Look in verse 4. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by faith. Here's a translation of that. Behold, the soul of the enemy is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Habakkuk 2 in verse 4. I just want to make sure that you jot this verse down somewhere. Because God is in the process of saying, hey Habakkuk, I'm going to take care of this problem. The Babylonians, I'm going to take care of them. They're going to get what's coming to them. But I'm going to use them as an instrument to bring judgment upon my people, to return them back to me. This is not a message that we want to hear. But I want to just stop and think about this verse for just a minute. Let me ask a strange question. What movie do you find yourself quoting the most? Like, at your house or with your group of friends. Is there a movie that you're always quoting? I jotted down a few from my home. A lot of times we'll find ourselves, saying, hey, it's your birthday and here's a gift card. Go get yourself something really nice. That's Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation. Or occasionally, when somebody says something and they're kind of confused or they use a word and I'm like, I'll say, that word, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. What movie? Yeah, Princess Bride. Or every now and then when somebody says something that maybe they're criticizing my team or something like that, I'll look at them and I will say, you are a sad, strange little man and you have my pity. What movie? Toy Story. It's Buzz Lightyear to Woody. Or when there's a loud crash downstairs, when dishes fall over or somebody's doing something and something falls over, from upstairs I will yell out, and the flowers, they're still standing. That's a tough one. Anybody know what that's from? It's from Ghostbusters, after he pulls the tablecloth off. Yeah, anyway, I'm old. So what movie is it that you find yourself quoting more than any others? Mike's our camera guy. He's behind the camera running it. Mike, what's a movie that you find yourself quoting in your family? What's your most quotable movie?
Uncle Buck.
Uncle Buck. Okay, very good. What line from Uncle Buck? Or what parts? Yeah, okay, here's a quarter. Very good. So you guys have movie quotes, right? And you use them out of context, but everybody knows what they are. Wax on, wax off. I've got a bad feeling about this from Star Wars. We have movie quotes that we use in other settings that fit nicely, but then somebody will say it and everybody will go, oh, what movie? Well, you need to know that this quote, it gets quoted all throughout the New Testament. It's a really, really popular quote. And they're not just by accident, they're quoting Habakkuk. Look in Romans. Who wrote Romans? Paul. Is he pretty important? Yep. Look what he says. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes. First to the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. A righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. He's quoting Habakkuk. This guy that nobody knows anything about. And yet Paul is saying, somebody once said, Paul does it again in Galatians 3. Clearly, no one who relies on the law is justified before God because the righteous will live by faith. It's even in quotes to let you know that he's quoting. Once again, he quotes Habakkuk. Now, we don't know who wrote the book of Hebrews. There's lots of different arguments. Some say that Paul wrote it. It's debatable. But whoever wrote Hebrews quotes it again. Now, remember, this is Hebrews 10. If I were to ask you about the Faith Hall of Fame, the one chapter in the Bible that everybody goes to for faith, it's Hebrews 11. So right before the Hall of Faith, look what we see here. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you'll receive what He has promised. For in just a little while, He who is coming will come and will not delay. Again, quoting Habakkuk. But my righteous one will live by faith. And I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but those who have faith and are saved. God says the righteous are going to live by faith. We don't have much longer in this Saturday morning session. But I want you to think about just for a second, because somebody says, you know what? I just don't believe God because I just can't see Him. Or I don't have enough proof. Can I give you some sentences that I've collected over the years from mentors to help me understand this? A good definition of faith: trusting what you see in the Word until you see it in the world. God said it, and I don't see it yet, but I'm going to wait. See, sight is something that we see, but faith is trusting what God sees. These are simple, but I think worth remembering. With sight, you hear people say, I'll believe it when I see it. I love this one. Faith, I'll believe it until I see it. Man, there are some heroes in your lives that model this for you. Some of them are in the room with you. Some of them are older leaders, elders, their wives, grandparents. They've lived long enough to know this is true. Hey, but students, there are some 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. There are some high schoolers, middle schoolers that live this way too. Because some of you have been through something that says the only way I'm able to get through this mess, when it seemed like that God is nowhere, when I refocused to believe that God is now here, some of you have come to understand that faith does not mean everything will be okay, but that you'll be okay. Or faith is trusting what God says while waiting to see what God does. So Habakkuk is told this righteousness will live by faith. Let's go back to verse 5 of chapter 2. He says, indeed, wine betrays him, talking about the enemy. He's arrogant. He's never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations and take captives all the peoples. Will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn, saying, now I know you're getting lost because it's Habakkuk, it's Old Testament. You're like, oh, this Saturday morning. We're not going to read everything in Habakkuk. I'm going to read the last part of this chapter. But there are 5 woes, not like woe with a horse, but woe, W-O-E. He says about the enemy to Habakkuk, he says, Habakkuk, I want you to know that this enemy that's coming to you, I'm going to take care of them. 1, and look in verse 6. Woe to him who piles up stolen goods. He says, these people are greedy, and I'm not going to settle for it. Look at verse 9. Woe to him who builds his house by unjust gain. Look in verse 12. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by injustice. Look at verse 15. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it to him from the wineskin till they're drunk, so that they can gaze on their naked bodies. And then look at verse 19. Woe to him who says to wood, come to life, or to lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? It is covered with gold and silver. There is no breath in it. And then go back to verse 18. He says, of what value is an idol carved by a craftsman, or an image that teaches lies? For the one who makes it trusts in his own creation. He makes idols that cannot speak. It's a pretty powerful statement by God. God comes back with a reply to Habakkuk saying, God, don't you know these people are bad? And he says, oh, I know they're bad. And he tells them just how bad they are and how bad they're going to be. And he says, Habakkuk, you need to know that they're going to get what's coming to them. It will not delay. Though it linger, wait for it. He says you got to have faith. You just have to believe in what I see, Habakkuk, and not in what you see. I'm going to take care of this. But I'm going to cause and allow a little bit of hurt so that I don't allow a lot of harm. What do you mean by that? Think about a scalpel for a minute and a knife. Well, a knife can stab and a scalpel can cut. They both do the same thing, but the purpose of a scalpel is to perform surgery. It's going to hurt, or it would if we didn't have anesthesia or medicine. It would hurt, but it's trying to remove something that's going to cause harm. Filling a cavity sometimes is painful and it hurts, but it's trying to prevent other harm. God says, I'm going to allow a little bit of hurt so that my people don't experience harm. Again, we want a resolution, and God says, I want a relationship. But here, as we close out this session, I just want some of you to think about maybe some of the idols that we've created. We've turned a good thing, G-O-O-D, into a God thing. We also have temptations and addictions, but we've built up idols, and they can't speak. They don't have life. They have no breath. And God says if you want to worship them and you want to trust in those things, it's going to result in harm. Habakkuk has now complained to God twice. And God has now answered him twice. And that leaves one final chapter in Habakkuk. As we think about this idea of we get to the one chapter that changes everything, where Habakkuk refocuses. Martin Luther was reading the book of Romans, and he read that passage that I shared with you. The righteous will live by faith. Martin Luther said he realized then, there's nothing that I can do to deserve the grace and mercy of God. He said that one passage led him to the Protestant Reformation. You're sitting there because he read a verse that quoted Habakkuk, a guy who said, I don't understand what's going on. So we have one final session together, and tonight we're going to have some fun. We're going to look at something tonight. But as you split up into your groups, maybe if you have some time to just, after we turn this video off, just get in groups of 2 or 3 and just kind of say, what are you hearing Habakkuk say that you have said before? Do you think he was angry or hurt or confused? Has a friend of yours come to you with complaints like Habakkuk has? How do you think they would react if you said, you know what, somebody in the Bible actually asked those questions and God actually responded to them? They'd probably say, what did he say? And you could say, let's open it up and let's look at it together. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and it will not delay. So we finish up by dwelling on the fact that some of you are in the middle of a mess and you say, God, take care of this. And God seems to be walking in the other direction. He's not ignoring you. He says, you've got to trust that I know how to take care of this in a way that is going to allow you to be who I created you to be. I used that word last night, the word create. Remember it, because it's going to be very important tonight. We're going to pause here. We'll reconvene later tonight. Whatever you do as a group today, enjoy. And I look forward to being with you one final time live tonight, and then one final message from the book of Habakkuk. And let me just tell you, chapter 3 is great. Because you're like, I guess Habakkuk's going to complain a third time? Well, he's going to talk to God a third time, but he's completely changed his tune. I look forward to being with you tonight. Have a great day, guys. God bless.